Some places don't just hold stories, they absorb people. A hotel in 1890 Chicago, where guests enter and quietly disappear into rooms that were never meant to exist. A city in Morocco, where a single night beside a covered body becomes something you can never unsee or fully explain. And an underground world in Southeast Asia, where curiosity opens doors that should have stayed sealed beneath the earth. Different places, different years, same feeling underneath it all, that something is watching you long before you ever realize you stepped too close. And once you notice the silence behind the noise, it's already too late to turn back. Because not every door is meant to be opened, and not every witness is allowed to leave unchanged. Chicago, 1893. Beneath the suffocating glow of gas lamps and the feverish excitement of the World's Columbian Exposition, there stood a hotel that did not belong to the world of the living. It watched, it waited. Travelers came in droves, wide-eyed, hopeful, drawn by the promise of progress and spectacle. They passed beneath its doors with laughter still clinging to their lips, unaware that something ancient, something haram, something cursed, coiled within its walls like a sleeping jinn. The owner was a man of unsettling charm, a doctor, he claimed. His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, like verses whispered from a forbidden kitab. His smile lingered just a moment too long, as if savoring secrets only he could taste. Guests trusted him. They always did. But inside, the corridors twisted like veins beneath diseased skin. Doors locked from the outside. Hallways led nowhere, or worse, somewhere they were never meant to go. The air itself felt heavy, thick with something unseen, like the presence of a shaitan watching from just beyond the veil. And then the whispers began, soft at first. A name mentioned in passing, a traveler who never checked out, a woman who entered her room and was never seen again. No screams, no struggle, just silence, as if the hotel itself swallowed souls and erased their existence from the dunya. Some said the walls listened, others believed the building fed, and a few, the truly terrified, claimed that what lived inside was not human at all, but something older, something summoned, bound, and hungry. A jinn of hadid wa dam, the jinn of iron and blood. No one could prove anything, but people kept vanishing, and the hotel, it kept standing, waiting for the next soul to wander in. I was 19 when I left Dublin, young, restless, and possessed by something older than reason. Not ambition, not curiosity. No, it felt closer to a whisper, a pull, the kind that seeps into your bones like a waswasa, a quiet suggestion from something unseen. I told my granddaughters years later that wanderlust had always existed, long before glowing screens and curated fantasies. In the old days, it only took a map or a story to awaken the urge to flee into the unknown. But what I felt wasn't just wanderlust, it was a calling, and I answered. From London to Paris, I worked small jobs, saving coins and collecting fleeting moments. Cities passed like dreams, familiar, predictable, almost safe. Then came Spain, warm, alive, beautiful. But destiny, no, something darker, waited at the edge of the sea. At the Strait of Gibraltar, I stood staring across restless waters, and there it was, Morocco. So close it felt unreal, like a mirage, like a door slightly ajar. I remember thinking I could continue as planned. Italy, Greece, the places history had already explained, already tamed. Or I could step into something unknown, something untouched, something that did not want to be understood. The air shifted as I stared across that water. I swear it did, a faint heat against my skin, though the wind was cold. And for a fleeting second, I thought I heard something. Not a voice, not quite, more like a breath. Come. I didn't question it. I didn't hesitate. That was my mistake. The ferry ride was rough, the sea churning like something alive beneath us. By the time I arrived in Tangier, exhaustion clung to me like a shadow, but nothing could prepare me for what waited there. The moment I stepped off the bus, the world closed in. Men surrounded me instantly, voices overlapping, hands reaching, offering taxis, rooms, drugs, anything. Their words blurred into a chaotic hum, like a ritual spoken too fast to understand. One man grabbed my bag. I pulled it back, shouting. The others laughed. But their laughter, it didn't feel normal. It echoed strangely, like it didn't belong to them alone, as if something else laughed through them, something unseen. The city itself felt alive. The old streets twisted like a labyrinth, white walls reflecting harsh sunlight that made everything feel too bright, too exposed. Above me, laundry fluttered like ghostly flags, casting shifting shadows that moved when they shouldn't. The aswak, the markets were worse. Colors everywhere, spices piled high, cumin, cinnamon, ginger, filling the air with a scent so thick it almost suffocated. Oranges glowed like offerings. Copper trinkets shimmered unnaturally, catching light at impossible angles. And beneath it all, another smell. Sweet, heavy, oily. Hashish, they said, but it lingered too long, clung too deeply, like incense burned in rituals not meant for human eyes. Then came the call to prayer. It rose suddenly, echoing over rooftops, haunting, beautiful, and yet there was something beneath it, a vibration that didn't feel holy. It felt ancient and watching. That night, as darkness swallowed the city, I realized something I couldn't yet explain. Tangier didn't just exist, it observed, and somehow it knew I arrived.
Days passed in Tangier like fragments of a fever dream. By day, I lost myself in its chaos, mint tea bittersweet on my tongue, the aswak humming like a living organism, and the distant echo of prayer rolling across rooftops like a warning carried by unseen winds. By night, the city changed. The shadows deepened, and something in the air grew heavier. I stayed in a small hostel, nothing more than 2 crowded dormitories divided by gender. Thin mattresses lined the floor like offerings, each traveler drifting in and out like ghosts passing through the same cursed space. It was simple, cheap, forgettable, or so I believed. Most nights, exhaustion dragged me into sleep without resistance. The others, those who mixed alcohol and hashish, would collapse into restless, unnatural silence, their breathing uneven, almost mechanical, as if something watched over them,
as if something waited. One night, I returned later than usual. The city had drained me, leaving behind only a dull ache and the faint unease I couldn't quite name. The dorm was dim, lit only by weak flickering light that barely reached the corners. That's when I saw it. A shape on one of the mattresses, covered completely beneath a blue sheet. Still, too still. At first, I thought nothing of it. People passed out all the time, lost in drink, lost in smoke, lost in whatever invisible forces drifted through Tangier's nights. I told myself it was normal. I needed it to be normal. So I ignored it. I lay down, turned my back, and slept. But even in sleep, something felt wrong. A pressure, a presence, like standing too close to something forbidden, like the silent proximity of a jinn that had not yet decided whether you were prey or witness. Morning came slowly, too slowly. The heat was already rising when I woke, pressing down like an unseen weight. I moved quietly, as always, careful not to disturb the others, careful not to disturb her, because the blue sheet, it hadn't moved, not once. I dressed, washed, gathered my things, all while avoiding looking directly at it, as if acknowledging it would force me to understand what I wasn't ready to see. 9 hours. 9 hours under that suffocating Moroccan heat, and not a single movement, not even a breath, not even the subtle shifting of sleep. Deep down, something inside me whispered the truth, but I silenced it. I left the hostel, spent the day wandering again, pretending everything was normal, pretending the aswak were just markets, the smells just spices, the shadows just shadows. But they weren't. Nothing was. When I returned that afternoon, something had changed. The air felt different, thicker, tainted. 2 police cars stood outside the hostel, their presence cutting through the street like a blade. People lingered nearby, speaking in hushed tones that felt more like prayers than conversation. And as I stepped inside, a voice barked at me in Arabic, sharp, commanding, not a question, an order. I froze. And in that moment, the truth I had avoided all morning came crashing down on me like a curse finally spoken aloud. The blue sheet, the stillness, the silence. It wasn't sleep. It had never been sleep. It was death, and I had spent the entire night beside it, unaware, unprotected, watched. The moment the word death settled into my bones, everything around me seemed to warp. Inside the hostel in Tangier, the air no longer felt like air. It felt like something breathed out by an unseen presence, heavy, watching. A police officer stood in my path, his eyes sharp, searching. He spoke rapidly in Arabic, his tone cutting through the silence like a blade. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the intent. Stop. Don't move. You are not free to leave. Before panic could fully take hold, the hostel owner rushed over. His English, once comforting, now sounded strained, like a man trying to translate not just language, but something far darker. There's been an incident, he said. But even before he finished, I knew. The girl, the one beneath the blue shroud, dead, murdered. The word hung in the air like a curse, Maktula. They began asking questions immediately. Where had I been last night? What time did I return? Had I spoken to her? A French girl, they said, her name uncertain, Celine perhaps, or something close to it. A name already fading, as if even memory itself rejected what had happened. The questioning dragged on, each answer passing through the owner like a broken echo. The officers watched me closely, their eyes cold, calculating, as if searching for cracks in my story. Or perhaps something else, something unnatural. One officer leaned closer and asked how I slept. The question struck me as strange, almost absurd. But then he asked again, more slowly, more deliberately, had I noticed anything unusual in the morning? And that's when it happened. The realization didn't come gently. It struck, like something forcing its way into my mind. The blue sheet, the unmoving form, the unbearable stillness. 9 hours in that suffocating heat. No movement, no breath, no life. A human body cannot remain that still unless... My stomach turned violently. The room spun. I hadn't just slept near a corpse. I had lived beside it, moved around it, ignored it, as if some unseen force had clouded my perception, like a veil placed over my senses by something ancient, something that did not want me to see. A djinn of silence, a watcher. The officers exchanged glances. They saw the shift in my face, the horror, the guilt, and for a fleeting moment, I thought they believed I had done it, or worse, that I had been chosen. They asked me to come with them, not violently, not roughly, but firmly, as if refusal was not an option. The streets outside felt different now. The noise of Tangier, once chaotic and vibrant, had dulled into something distant, almost unreal. People watched as I was led to the Sayada. Their eyes lingered, not curious, not sympathetic, knowing, as if they had seen this before, as if they understood something I did not. At the police station, the questioning continued. Other travelers sat scattered across worn plastic chairs, each one pale, shaken, like souls pulled briefly from the edge of something dark. They didn't lock us in cells. They didn't need to. Fear was enough. Time stretched unnaturally. Questions repeated. Details blurred. But slowly, something became clear. They did not see me as the killer, not anymore. And yet, they didn't trust me either, because no one could explain how a room full of people had slept through a murder. No screams, no struggle, no sound, only silence. A silence so deep it felt unnatural, as if the act itself had been swallowed, hidden, protected. And somewhere deep inside me, a thought began to form, quiet, terrifying, impossible to ignore. What if it wasn't just a person who did this? What if something else was in that room with us? Something ancient, something unseen, that moved between breaths and chose who would wake. Days passed, but time in Tangier no longer felt real. It dragged, warped, twisted into something unnatural. The El Shorta eventually returned with news. They had arrested a suspect. No details, no explanations, just a quiet declaration that we were no longer under suspicion. Free to leave. Free, but not untouched. No one asked questions. No one wanted answers, because deep down we all knew something didn't make sense. A murder without sound. A room full of witnesses who witnessed nothing. A body lying among the living, unnoticed, as if a veil, hijab min ad-dalam, had been cast over us all. We stayed a few more nights. None of us wanted to sleep alone, so the men gave up their beds and moved outside, leaving the dorm for us. Even then, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak, every breath, every flicker of shadow felt wrong. It felt watched. Eventually, a small group of us left together, traveling south toward Marrakesh. We tried to return to normal, to laughter, to cheap meals, to the illusion of safety. And during the day, it almost worked. But night always brought it back. Someone would mention her, the girl with no name, the one who died beneath a blue sheet while we slept. And the atmosphere would shift, heavy, suffocating, like the presence of something lingering just beyond sight. We never spoke about how it happened, only that it did. Because to question it too deeply meant confronting something none of us were ready to face, that we had not been alone in that room. Years passed, decades even, but I never forgot. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I still see it, the faint outline beneath that blue sheet, still, silent, waiting. And worse, I remember how easily I ignored it, how something inside me refused to see. That's what truly terrifies me. Not the murder, not the police, not even the unknown killer, but the possibility that something was there with us, something that can silence a room, something that can hide death in plain sight, something that can bend awareness itself, like a whisper from a jinn that does not want to be discovered. I told my granddaughters this story for one reason, not to frighten them, but to warn them, because the world is not just full of people. There are places, moments, shadows, where something older lingers, watching, waiting, and if you're unlucky enough to cross its path, you may never even realize it was there until it's too late. Before we continue with the rest of the story, are you enduring this fear alone? How does it feel? Comment below. New viewers, subscribe now. September 1996. I was 18, young enough to believe the world was an open door, and foolish enough not to ask what waited on the other side. Most people begin a gap year with a plan. I had none. No map, no direction, just a thin wallet and a restless urge that felt less like curiosity and more like a pull. Quiet, persistent waswasa, whispering that somewhere far from home, something waited for me. At first, I considered the obvious: South America, cheap, vibrant, alive. Places like Colombia or Peru, where my money might stretch long enough for adventure to feel endless. But fate, or something darker, intervened. One evening, while absent-mindedly watching the news, I saw a broadcast about something called Visit Myanmar Year. The screen filled with parades, dancers, colors, and a strange, almost forced celebration. Behind it all stood a figure, distant, official, unreadable. And yet, something about it felt wrong, like joy being performed, like a ritual meant to hide something beneath it. The report explained that Myanmar, once known as Burma, had begun opening its borders after decades of isolation. A land untouched, they said. Pristine beaches, ancient temples, lush jungles untouched by time. A hidden paradise. But paradise, I would later learn, often demands a price. The deeper I looked, the more unsettling the truth became. The country was ruled by a military regime, cold, authoritarian, whispers of zulm that turned men into prisoners and prisoners into adawat, tools for labor. Entire buildings, they said, had been constructed by those who were never paid, never freed, never remembered. Among them, hotels, new, polished, inviting, built on suffering. There was even a quiet resistance movement urging travelers to stay away, a warning disguised as a campaign. Do not go. Do not support this. But warnings have a strange way of sounding like invitations to the young. And I was very young.
I didn't think about ethics. I didn't think about consequences. I only thought about how far my money could take me and how thrilling it would be to step into a place untouched for decades, to walk where others hadn't, to see what had been hidden. That was my mistake. 17 hours later, after a long, disorienting journey with a stop somewhere in the Middle East, I landed in Yangon. The heat hit me first, thick, suffocating, like breathing in something alive. The city itself felt layered. Old colonial buildings stood beside crumbling streets, shadows clinging to their edges as if they had something to hide. And above it all, towering into the sky, were golden pagodas, massive, radiant, almost blinding under the sun, beautiful, but unsettling, like something sacred that had been watching long before I arrived. I avoided the grand hotels. Something about them felt wrong, too polished, too quiet. Instead, I found a small hostel near Chinatown, cheap, simple, 80 pence a night. It should have felt like a win, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. That same sensation I couldn't quite name, a stillness, a presence, like the building itself was aware of me, watching, waiting, and somewhere deep within it, something moved.
The hostel in Yangon was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. Not peaceful, not calm, but suppressed, like sound itself had been swallowed by something lurking just beneath the surface. The owner, Min, was a soft-spoken man with a warm smile, the kind that should have put me at ease. He greeted guests with politeness, his movements measured, his voice low, but there was something behind his eyes, something unreadable, like he was always thinking about something else, something hidden. Days passed easily enough. I wandered through the city, staring up at golden pagodas that shimmered unnaturally under the sun, their surfaces reflecting light like molten fire. Locals moved with quiet purpose, their expressions guarded, as if they knew better than to ask questions, as if they had already learned. But it was the nights that began to unravel everything. At first, it was just a sound, faint, distant, like footsteps echoing where there should have been none. Then I noticed Min. Every night, around the same time, past midnight, he would leave the main building and walk toward the back courtyard. Not alone, never alone. Small groups followed him, 5, 10, sometimes more, silent, obedient, like participants in a ritual they dared not speak of. Beyond the courtyard stood a small concrete structure, plain, unremarkable, a single heavy door, no windows. Nothing about it suggested importance, and yet everything about it felt wrong. From my window, I watched, night after night. The door would open, people would enter, and then nothing. No sound, no music, no laughter, no movement. Just silence. A silence so complete it felt deliberate, as if whatever happened beyond that door was never meant to reach the outside world. Like a secret buried beneath layers of earth, like something sealed away. One night, as I watched, Min stopped. He turned his head slowly and looked directly at my window, at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. His expression didn't change. No anger, no surprise, just awareness, as if he always knew I was watching. Then, without a word, he turned back and disappeared inside the concrete structure. The door closed behind him with a dull, final sound. That night, sleep did not come easily. The air in my room felt heavier than before, pressing down on my chest like an unseen weight.
Every creak of the building echoed too loudly. Every shadow lingered too long. And somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard something. Not voices, not quite. More like muffled echoes, struggling to escape. The next afternoon, Min confronted me. Not angrily, not directly, but with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You were watching," he said casually. I froze. There was no point in denying it, so I admitted it, lightly, almost jokingly. "Curiosity," I told him. "Nothing more." He laughed softly, a controlled sound, measured. Then he explained. "A small gathering," he said. "Cards, gambling, nothing serious." But something in his tone felt rehearsed, like a story told too many times. So I asked if I could join. That's when his smile faded, just slightly. He shook his head. "No," he said, polite, firm, final. He told me he didn't like mixing guests with that part of his life, that it could lead to misunderstandings, problems. His words were calm, but beneath them there was something else. A warning, unspoken, unmistakable. I should have listened. I should have let it go. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It festers, grows, spreads like a whisper in the dark. And once it takes hold, it doesn't let go. Especially when something on the other side of a locked door seems to be calling.
Curiosity does not fade. It mutates. What began as a passing interest became an obsession, something that coiled inside me like a whispering djinn, urging me closer to that sealed door behind the hostel in Yangon. For days I watched, counted, measured. Every night, Min led people into that concrete structure, sometimes 20, sometimes 30. Too many for a simple card game, too silent for anything innocent. And then I saw him, the man who broke whatever illusion I still clung to. It was late, past midnight. The courtyard lay under a dim, flickering light that made everything look distorted, unreal. The door opened and Min stepped out, dragging someone with him. A man, crying, not quietly, not with dignity, but with a kind of broken, desperate sound that didn't belong in any ordinary situation. His voice cracked as he spoke in Burmese, pleading, begging, or maybe confessing. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the fear. Min stood still, listening. His expression was calm, too calm. Then, without emotion, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of cash. He peeled off a few notes and forced them into the man's shirt. The man didn't react, didn't thank him, didn't even look at the money. He just kept crying. That's when Min snapped. A sharp command, cold, final. The man fell silent instantly, like something had been cut inside him. Then he staggered away into the darkness, alone, broken, and Min simply turned and went back inside. The door closed, silence returned, but something inside me had changed. That wasn't gambling. It couldn't be. No game ends with a man leaving like that, empty, hollow, as if something had been taken from him that money could never replace. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air in my room felt wrong, thick, suffocating, like breathing through fabric soaked in something unseen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, heard that sound, that broken, desperate sound. And beneath it all, something whispered, "Find out. Open the door. See what waits." By morning, the decision had already been made. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Later that day,
I went to one of the few banks in the city that handled foreign accounts. The building felt sterile, detached from the rest of Yangon. Too clean, too controlled, like a place where things were measured, calculated, exchanged. I withdrew exactly 1 million kyat, a ridiculous amount for me at the time, roughly 50 or 60 pounds. The teller counted it out slowly, giving me a strange look, as if she sensed something off, as if she knew that money wasn't meant for anything good. I didn't care, not anymore, because by then, curiosity had turned into something darker, a need, an obsession, a pull that felt almost supernatural, like a dawa muslima, a dark invitation I could no longer ignore. I spent the rest of the day waiting, not living, not exploring, just waiting for night, for Min, for the moment the door would open again. And when it did, I would be there, no matter what waited on the other side.
Night fell heavy over Yangon, thick, suffocating, as if the darkness itself had weight. I waited, watched, counted. Just past 1 a.m., like clockwork, Min began leading people toward the concrete structure again. One by one, they slipped inside, swallowed by that silent door. This time, I followed. My heart pounded like a warning I chose to ignore. The courtyard air felt wrong, too still, too quiet, like stepping into a place where something unseen already knew you didn't belong. I knocked. A small metal slit slid open. Eyes stared back at me, hard, suspicious. "Min?" I asked. The slit slammed shut. For a moment, I thought that was it. I should have left, but I didn't. I knocked again, and this time, the door swung open. Min stood there, but he wasn't the man I knew. His face was colder, his eyes darker, stripped of warmth, stripped of pretense, like something else was looking through him, something that had been waiting. I held out the money, 1 million kyat, an offering, a key. He stared at it for a long moment, then pushed it back toward me. "Keep it," he said quietly. "You'll need it." That should have been my final warning. It wasn't. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous. "If you speak of what you see, the police will find things in your bag, things you cannot explain." No anger, no threat in tone, just certainty, like fate already written. I nodded, because what else could I do? And then he let me in. We passed through the door and descended. Down, down. The staircase twisted beneath us, like the spine of something buried deep underground. Each step felt heavier, the air growing thicker, harder to breathe, like descending into something alive. The walls were damp, cold, and silent, too silent, until we reached another door, thick, reinforced, and from behind it, sound, muffled at first, then growing, voices, shouting, a rising chaos barely contained. Min turned to me. "Are you sure?" he asked. I should have said no. I didn't. The door opened, and the world exploded. Noise hit me like a physical force, hundreds of voices shouting, screaming. The space beyond was enormous, far larger than anything that should have existed beneath that small structure. A hidden chamber, a buried arena, a place not meant to exist. People crowded around the central pit, their faces lit with something I had never seen before. Not excitement, not joy, something darker, something primal, something that felt closer to Abad al-Zalam, worship of darkness. At first, I thought it was some kind of fight. Blood stained the floor. A man hosed it down casually, like it meant nothing, like it happened often.
too often. But then I saw the contestants. 2 young men, one with a white headband, one with black. They stood facing each other in the pit, trembling, not with anger, but with fear. Real fear, the kind that strips everything human away. I turned to Min. "What is this?" I asked. He smiled, for the second time since I had met him, and this time it wasn't warm. "This," he said, "is a game of chance." A revolver appeared. The referee held it up, showing the chamber, empty, except for a single bullet. My blood ran cold. I knew, before he even said it, Russian roulette. The words echoed in my mind like a curse. The crowd roared. Bets were placed. Money exchanged hands with frantic urgency, like they weren't just watching, they were feeding on it. The cylinder spun. The gun was handed to the man with the black headband. He raised it slowly, hand shaking, pressed it to his temple, closed his eyes. Click. Nothing. The crowd erupted. Laughter, cheers, madness. Then the gun passed to the white headband. Click. Again. Nothing. The cycle continued, each turn dragging the tension tighter, tighter, until it felt like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting, hoping, death. And standing there, surrounded by it, I realized something that chilled me deeper than anything else. This wasn't just gambling. This wasn't just cruelty. This felt ritualistic, deliberate, like something ancient was being honored, fed, satisfied, a gin of blood and chance, and we were all part of its game.
The final round arrived like a judgment. Inside the underground chamber beneath Yangon, the air had become unbearable, thick with sweat, smoke, and something far older than either. Something that felt like it had been waiting beneath human history itself. The 2 men, white headband and black headband, stood trembling in the pit. By now, both had survived multiple empty chambers. The crowd no longer looked like spectators. They looked like believers, like participants in something sacred and forbidden. A silence fell. Even the betting stopped. The referee stepped forward, his face expressionless, and placed the final bullet into the revolver. Only one remained. Only one truth left to reveal. He spun the cylinder, slow, deliberate, like a ritual performed not for sport, but for something watching from beyond sight. The gun was handed back. The black headband man went first. His hands shook violently now, not from fear of dying, but from the weight of inevitability. His eyes squeezed shut as he lifted the weapon. Click. Nothing. A wave of chaotic sound exploded through the room. Cheers, groans, curses. Money changed hands like spilled blood. Then came the white headband. He laughed, a short, broken sound, as if something inside him had already accepted what was coming. He raised the gun, pressed it to his head, and for a moment, the entire world stopped. Even I stopped breathing. There was no sound, no movement, no mercy, only the sensation that something unseen had leaned closer, watching, waiting, like a genie hovering just beyond the edge of reality. Then, bang! The sound was not just loud, it was absolute. White headband collapsed instantly, his skull shattered outward, painting the pit in a violent bloom of red and bone. No one screamed, not in horror, only reaction. Some cursed, some cheered, some laughed, as if death was just another outcome in a game they understood too well. I stood frozen,
my mind refused to process what my eyes had already accepted. This was not a game. This was a system, a machine built around chance, death, and worship disguised as gambling. And Min stood beside me, smiling again. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You won." It took me a moment to realize he meant me, my bet, my money. I had won. He guided me forward through the shifting crowd, through bodies that didn't even glance at the dead man anymore, and handed me a thick bundle of cash. Blood money. It felt warm in my hands, wrong, alive. When we finally returned to the surface, the night air hit differently, cleaner, colder, as if the earth itself was trying to forget what had just happened beneath it. Min walked beside me calmly, as if nothing had changed. Then he spoke. "Have you seen enough?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I had seen far too much, and not nearly enough. As we reached the hostel courtyard, Min stopped me one final time. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle, but beneath it lay something unmistakable, a warning. "If you speak of this, you will not be believed." He paused, then added almost kindly, "And if you are, it will not matter." I understood then. It was never about secrecy. It was about control, about something deeper than law or crime, something that lived beneath human systems, like an ancient curse stitched into the soil of this place. A hunger, a ritual, a presence that did not care who saw, because it had already been seen for generations. I left that night, didn't sleep, didn't speak, just walked until the city blurred into darkness and memory began to fracture. Later, I gave away the money, every last note, as if returning it might cleanse what it had touched. But it didn't. It never does. Even now, years later, I still hear it sometimes. That silence before the trigger. That moment when the world waits for permission to end. And I wonder, was it really just a game? Or was something else watching from beneath the floor? Something that still remembers my name? Before we continue with the rest of the story, are you enduring this fear alone? How does it feel? Comment below. New viewers, subscribe now. I was traveling through Southeast Asia like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. Philippines first, sunlit coasts, humid nights, cities that never fully slept. Then Vietnam, loud, chaotic, alive in a way that felt almost overwhelming. After that, Malaysia, food, heat, and endless streets that blurred into one another. Everywhere I went, I told myself I was just traveling. But deep down, it felt more like I was being led, like something unseen was guiding my path with invisible fingers. Quiet waswas, always just behind my thoughts. Eventually, I ended up on the island of Sri Lanka. It was different from everything before it, softer at first glance, almost peaceful. Coastal towns stretched along the ocean like forgotten dreams, sunlight, waves, and slow evenings that made you believe the world had no hidden darkness. The place I stayed was a small beachside hostel in a town called Hikkaduwa. Cheap rooms, shared dorms, nothing unusual. And that's where I met him, Mika, a man from Finland. At first, he seemed like the kind of traveler every backpacker hopes to meet. Loud, friendly, endlessly energetic. He knew where the cheapest food was, where the best beer was hidden, where the nights turned into something unforgettable. He showed me everything. Beach parties after sunset, hidden cafes serving iced coffee that felt like salvation in the heat, streets where music never seemed to stop, as if the island itself refused silence. For a while, it felt like freedom, like I had finally escaped everything heavy that followed me from place to place. But Sri Lanka had its own way of hiding things, its own quiet darkness beneath the surface. One morning, after a long night of drinking and laughter, we returned to the hostel to find someone already in our room. A new guest, uninvited. A massive man, red hair, pale skin, silent presence. He stood there in nothing but a towel, unpacking slowly, as if the world around him didn't matter at all. He didn't greet us, didn't acknowledge us, just looked at us once, with a blank, unreadable expression, like we were not people, just objects in a room he now occupied. Mika tried to speak to him. No response, just silence, heavy, intentional. When Mika finally asked if he spoke Russian, the man answered. One word. Da. That was it. Everything else about him stayed locked behind that single confirmation. Something about him felt wrong, not dangerous in an obvious way, but unstable, like a storm held together by habit alone. Mika and I exchanged a look. We didn't need to speak. We both felt it. This man was not just rude, he was off. After a brief, tense exchange, Mika suggested we leave the room for a while. We went to the beach, trying to shake the feeling off with alcohol and sunlight. For a few hours, it worked. Almost. But as night returned, so did that strange unease. And then I saw him again. The Russian man, alone on the beach, half-conscious, slumped in a chair outside a closed bar. Two local men stood nearby, clearly frustrated, explaining something in low voices. The bar had closed. They wanted him gone. But he didn't move, just sat there, silent, unresponsive, like something had switched off inside him. I approached without thinking. That was my mistake. At first, I tried joking, talking, even negotiating. Nothing worked. Until I said one word. Vodka. His eyes changed instantly, like something buried deep inside him had just been unlocked. And he stood.
The moment I said the word vodka, something in the Russian man from Sri Lanka changed. Not gradually, not subtly, instantly. His bloodshot eyes sharpened, as if a buried consciousness had been dragged back to the surface by a single key. The locals standing nearby exchanged uneasy looks, but I didn't notice at first. I thought I had helped. I thought I had understood him. That was my second mistake. He stood up slowly from the beach chair, his body heavy, unsteady, like a machine restarting after too long in the dark. Then he began walking, without direction, without words, just following me as if I had become his only signal in a static world. I kept talking to him, half joking, half nervous. He didn't respond, not once. Just that same blank focus locked somewhere behind my shoulder. We walked for minutes along the shoreline. The ocean was calm that night, too calm, the kind of calm that makes sound feel louder than it should be. Eventually, the lights of our hostel appeared ahead. That's when I noticed it. His mood shifted again. The moment he realized I wasn't leading him toward alcohol or meaning, something inside him snapped back into confusion and anger. His steps grew heavier, faster, unstable. He said something in Russian, low, sharp, broken, but I didn't understand. I told him to relax, tried to calm him, but it was already too late. The air between us changed. It wasn't just aggression, it was collapse.
What followed wasn't a fight in the normal sense. It was chaos. A sudden explosion of violence from a man who was too large, too drunk, and too lost inside himself to stop once he started. He grabbed me, and the world tilted violently as we hit the sand. I tried to push him off. He overpowered me easily. It felt like wrestling something built from stone and alcohol and rage. Then he struck me, again and again. Pain flashed through my skull like broken light. The world narrowed into sand, breath, and panic. And then, his hand closed around my throat. That was the moment everything changed. Not fear, not pain, something deeper, pure survival. I remember thinking very clearly, this is how it ends. The pressure tightened. My vision blurred at the edges. The sound of the ocean faded, replaced by a rushing noise inside my head. I tried to fight back. Nothing worked. My punches were weak, useless, lost in the weight of him. I tried clawing at his hands. No effect. The world was shrinking, darker, far away. And then, a voice. Sharp, sudden. Oi! Something slammed into him like a meteor in an instant. The Russian man was ripped off me in an instant, thrown sideways into the sand. I lay there coughing, gasping, trying to pull air back into my body as reality slowly returned. 3 figures stood over him, built, strong, confident, Australian. They moved fast, too fast for him to recover. One pinned his arms, while another kept him down. The third looked at me briefly. "You all right, mate?" he asked. I couldn't answer properly, just nodded, barely. The rush had struggled, but it was over. They controlled him easily now, like he had finally become what he always was beneath the surface, just a collapsing weight of alcohol and anger. One of them said they would get the police. I didn't stop them. I couldn't. As I sat there on the sand, shaking, I realized something horrifying. If those men had not arrived at that exact moment, there would have been no story left to tell. Only silence. The same kind of silence I had already encountered in other places. The kind that follows something being erased. Later that night, I told Mika everything. We didn't stay long after that. Something about the island no longer felt playful or free. It felt unstable, like the surface of reality itself had cracked just slightly. And once you see that crack, you don't stop seeing it. We left the next day, moved further down the coast, quiet, uneasy, as if the island had let us go. Not because we escaped it, but because it was done with us. We moved further along the coast of Sri Lanka, trying to convince ourselves that distance would erase what had happened. It didn't. If anything, the feeling only followed us more quietly, like something walking just behind our thoughts, matching our pace exactly. The new hostel was larger, more crowded. 5 dorm rooms, shared bathrooms, cheap beds stacked like temporary lives. I met Mika there properly. Same chaos-loving traveler I had already begun to rely on without admitting it. He made everything feel lighter. Jokes, plans, distractions. But even Mika couldn't fully erase the tension that lingered after the Russian incident. We tried. We really did. We drank, explored, laughed too loudly at small things, as if noise itself could drown memory. Then one morning, everything shifted again. We returned from breakfast, eggs, spice, heat still clinging to our skin, expecting the usual mess of shared dorm life. But something was wrong. Too quiet. When we opened the door to our room, there was a presence already inside. Someone had taken the empty bed. A new traveler. He was massive. Red hair, pale skin, thick build, almost unnaturally large in the confined space of the room. He stood in nothing but a towel, unpacking slowly, methodically, like he had no awareness of the world around him, or no interest in it. He didn't greet us, didn't acknowledge us, just looked at us once, then away. A blank stare so empty, it felt like a refusal to exist in the same reality. Mika tried first. "Hey man, how's it going?" No response, only silence, heavy, deliberate. The kind of silence that doesn't come from language barriers, but from something deeper, more absolute, as if he had already decided we were irrelevant. I gave Mika a look, a silent question. What is this guy's problem? Mika didn't answer immediately. He studied him for a moment, then asked carefully, "Ruski?" The man paused, then spoke. "Da." One word, that was all. But somehow it changed the temperature of the room. He was Russian, and suddenly everything about his behavior clicked into a pattern that didn't feel comforting at all. Not language, not culture. Something else. Something unstable. Mika asked his name. The response was sharp, dismissive. "None of your business." That was the closest thing to identity he offered. After that, tension filled the room like a gas leak. Every movement felt measured, cautious. Even breathing felt louder than it should. Eventually, Mika pulled me outside. We walked along the beach, discussing what to do. He wasn't scared exactly, but alert, thinking in solutions, not panic. "Leave," he said, "or stay one more night and observe." Most travelers in Sri Lanka were harmless, he added. Even the strange ones usually revealed themselves quickly. But this one felt different, like something pressed too tightly into human form. We decided to wait one night, just one. That was our compromise. But that night, something else began to unfold, something neither of us had planned for, and neither of us would forget. Because in places like Sri Lanka, strangers don't always stay strangers for long. Sometimes they reveal exactly why they are alone. And sometimes you realize you were never really alone in the first place.
That night in Sri Lanka felt different from all the others. Not loud, not festive, just unstable. Like the island itself was holding its breath. Mika and I stayed out late, trying to burn off the discomfort from the strange Russian man in our room. The bars near the beach were still open, music spilling into the warm air, tourists laughing too loudly as if nothing in the world could go wrong. But I couldn't shake it. That blank stare, that silence, that refusal to be human in any normal way. Eventually, Mika left with a British girl he had met earlier. He gave me a grin, a clap on the shoulder, and disappeared into the night without hesitation. I stayed behind. Not because I wanted to, but because something in me felt unsettled about returning too early. Like going back would mean confronting something I wasn't ready for. So I walked, alone. The beach stretched endlessly under the night sky, waves rolling in with a steady rhythm that should have been calming. Instead, it felt like repetition, like something ancient performing the same motion over and over again, endlessly. Halfway back to the hostel, I noticed something ahead. Two local Sri Lankan men stood near a lounge chair outside a closed beach bar. Between them sat someone massive. Even from a distance, I knew who it was. The Russian. He was slumped in the chair like a broken structure, head tilted forward, barely conscious. His face was red, his breathing heavy, like a man collapsing under his own weight. The locals were trying to reason with him, calm voices, frustrated gestures.
The bar was closed. They needed him gone. But he didn't move, didn't respond, just sat there like an object that had forgotten how to leave. For a moment, I hesitated. Then, against all logic, I called out, "Hey, buddy, how's it going?" Both locals turned toward me. The Russian slowly lifted his head. His eyes met mine, and I immediately regretted speaking. The locals explained the situation quickly. The bar was shut. They had tried to move him, but he refused, simply sat down and stayed there, as if the concept of closing time did not apply to him. He was too drunk to stand properly, but too stubborn or too lost to leave. I tried talking to him. Nothing worked. No reaction, no understanding, just that same blank, heavy presence. Eventually, one of the locals said something that sounded half amused, half exhausted. The only word I understood clearly was vodka. That was it. One trigger. His head lifted, his eyes sharpened, and for the second time I saw that strange transformation, the shift from emptiness to obsession, like something deep inside him had been activated by a single key. He stood, slowly, unsteadily, but he stood, and then he began walking with me. Not because he understood, but because something inside him had locked on a single idea: follow. I didn't realize it then, but I had stopped being a person to him. I had become a direction, a signal, something to move toward. We walked along the shoreline together, him silent, me talking out of nervous habit. I tried jokes, questions, anything to fill the space between us. Nothing reached him, only silence, heavy and growing. When the lights of the hostel finally appeared ahead, I felt relief. Too soon. Because the moment he realized we weren't heading toward alcohol anymore, his behavior changed again. His pace shifted, his body tightened. The silence broke, not into speech, but into aggression. Something inside him snapped, and the night, which had already felt wrong, became dangerous. The moment we reached the edge of the hostel in Sri Lanka, I knew something had gone wrong inside him. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but like a slow crack spreading through glass. The Russian man's posture changed first, then his breathing, then the way he looked at me. It was no longer confusion, it was anger, dull, heavy, and uncontrolled. I tried to calm him down, told him to relax, that we could get drinks another time. My words meant nothing. They didn't even register. He stepped closer. Too close. The air between us tightened like a rope being pulled. Then he moved. Fast. Violent. There was no warning I could properly react to. One moment he was standing there. The next I was on the ground, sand scraping against my skin as he brought his weight down on me. The world turned chaotic. Breathing became difficult immediately. My vision blurred at the edges. The ocean, the sky, the lights from the hostel, all of it smeared together into something meaningless. He hit me once, then again, each strike heavy enough to shake thought out of my mind. I tried to defend myself, but he was stronger, bigger, fueled by something that wasn't just alcohol anymore. It was rage, or something deeper than that, something broken. Then his hands closed around my throat, and everything stopped being a fight. It became survival. Pressure tightened instantly. My body reacted before my mind could fully process what was happening. I tried pulling at his wrists, but it was useless. He was locked in, completely focused, like nothing else existed. The sound of the ocean faded. The world narrowed. All I could feel was him. All I could hear was my own breath, trying and failing to exist. I remember thinking very clearly, this is how it ends. I tried punching him. No effect. I tried clawing. Still nothing. The pressure increased. My vision darkened. And then, a voice. Sharp. Sudden. Oi! Something slammed into him with full force. He was ripped off me instantly. The weight disappeared. Air rushed back into my lungs violently as I rolled onto the sand, coughing, gasping, trying to understand what had just happened. 3 men stood over him, Australians, strong, built, immediate control in their movements. One of them had tackled him cleanly, and the others were already pinning him down before he could recover. It was over in seconds. Not chaos anymore. Control. One of them looked at me. "You all right, mate?" he asked. I couldn't speak properly, just nodded, barely. The Russian struggled beneath them, but it was pointless now. Whatever fury had been inside him was no match for 3 calm, coordinated bodies. One of the Australians said he'd call the police. I tried to protest. They ignored it gently, told me to go home, shower, clean the sand off, like it was just another bad night. But as I walked away, still shaking, still trying to process what had almost happened, I realized something terrifying. I had come far too close to dying for something that began with a single word: vodka. And worse than that, I still didn't understand what the Russian man truly was in that moment. Just drunk? Just angry? Or something more unstable? Something that had been waiting to break long before I ever met him. That night, I left everything behind, moved on with Mika, tried to convince myself it was over. But even now, I still remember the feeling of those hands around my throat and the absolute certainty that for a few seconds, I was already gone.
And with that, we bring tonight's terrifying story to an end. But remember, as the night grows darker, the secrets only grow deeper. Follow or subscribe now, if you have the courage.